I was fortunate enough to work with some very experienced people right from the beginning of going to war zones and conflict zones, and very much the starting point, whether it was in radio or here at ITN, was everybody's in this together, and even the most junior person has a say in what we do and how close to any action we do, and also that we would all talk. We'd all talk about, do you know what, I'm finding this really scary today, or do you know what, something doesn't feel right, and being able to open up about that. And it didn't matter if you were 23 or 53, you were equal in those decisions. Now, of course, I was being guided by people with more experience, but the idea of being able to open up and talk about it and not just be brave and think I'm going to be foolhardy and go into it. And I think that for me has always set the starting point for conflict zones. And of course, we probably weren't talking about mental health then in the way we do now, but it's still about your sort of mental safety as a team and how you feel about going to those more tricky situations. I still think there's a way to go in understanding how we best support people. And I think we sort of imagine at some point it'll be like, if you have flu, you have 2 weeks off, or if you break your leg, you have physio. I still think everybody's pathway is very, very different with mental well-being. So I think there's still a bit of understanding different needs of different people. But I think the main thing is you can have that conversation, and we're talking about it at the top, and I hope at every level below as well. That's been the real feature of the last 5 years, really. It's been absolutely relentless from Brexit onwards, really. We also had a spate of terror attacks in the UK. For people working in the States, they were living under the Trump administration. And I think what sort of brings all these stories together, really, is they're not ones that you leave behind at the end of the day or at the end of your shift. They're things that we're all living and breathing all the time. There is no respite. And certainly currently with Israel-Gaza going on, you know, you wake up with a knot in your stomach and you go to bed with a knot in your stomach. And I think that set this era apart in that way. There is no escape from your work. There's no escape from being a journalist. But definitely it's built up, and it's built up. And I've noticed that maybe a few years ago on a really, really big story, you had about 4 weeks of people working at sort of full tilt because the adrenaline was there. And after that, you'd worry about people. I've watched that come down with every single one of these. And I think it's probably about a week of a really intense story, and you're watching people understandably find it really tough and sort of crack around the edges. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. So I think there is that, here's another one, and here's another one. And whilst everyone's still really professional and really good at the stories and care, it does take a toll. And that cumulative effect, it feels never ending. It feels that there's no break in sight, no let up, I suppose. And I'm not sure, looking at the world and the way it is, that we're going to see any let up anytime soon. And we've got so many elections coming up in the US and in the UK and really across the world. We've got climate change that's only getting worse. We've got all sorts of economic pressures. So I can't see an era where suddenly we're putting our feet up in August thinking it's silly season and scratching around for stories, that this is the pattern that's going to continue. It's about thinking about mental health right from the beginning. It's not waiting until you see the signs of people under pressure. I think it's baking it into everything you do. And certainly here, when Israel-Gaza started, we very early on had conversations about, okay, the team's going out there, what support are we going to give them whilst they're out there and when they're back? And the newsrooms too, we were immediately planning what sessions are we going to do about mental well-being? Are we going to put on discussions within the newsroom? We have in place a whole load of measures, as I'm sure lots of others do. So there's always places that staff can go to, but signposting that more quickly. But I think there's nothing more powerful than when your newsroom leaders also talk about it. So we held events across all the newsrooms where senior staff did talk about how tough it was and the rest. So I think it's about baking it into the story, as I said, almost from the beginning, and knowing this is another one of those. But also everyone is different. So I think it's keeping an eye out for individuals within it as well, and not assuming that everybody will be affected in the same way, or it's just the people on the front line. It could easily be the most junior person who's looking at a bit of social media, and it's making sure that support is given to everybody from the beginning. there's still an idea within journalism that particularly people who've been successful or got to the top, they're really tough, they're really resilient, probably a bit cynical, a bit seen it all before. But actually there's human beings under there, and we're all affected. And I think it's really important for everybody, whether it's managers, whether it's newscasters, whether it's the most sort of grizzled senior foreign correspondents, because we are all affected. And to be honest, I'm worried if they're not. I mean, I am a huge crier. It doesn't take very much to set me off, and watching our coverage, it regularly will set me off, particularly if it's got children, and the sort of coverage we do is always has people at the heart of it, so you've got people's stories, so it doesn't take much for me. One of the great things about a newsroom, I think, is that you have debriefs after each programme, so you have that immediate, straight after a programme or some content's got out, that chance to address staff. So I would regularly stand up and say, I've just found that really tough, or I've cried, or I've been moved by that. It's giving a sense of permission, but I also think it's really important with the work we do, because it's all about people, and it's just reminding that we're not removed from it and we're not detached. So I think that is powerful. We genuinely have definitely noticed it across our newsrooms, that when a newsroom leader does share their experiences, that's much more powerful than people just going off and using the staff hotline or using the support that's there more anonymously. And I'm always happy to say, do you know what, I'm finding it tough, I'm going to go and have an hour's therapy or a bit of counselling or use this, that and the other. And I think we all need it, and if we can encourage it, then that's got to be positive. The ones that stick with me are often the less well-known stories where you've gone to someone's house where they've gone through the most unimaginable horror. They've probably lost a member of their family, or someone's missing, or something awful, and the dignity that they afford you and how nice they are. And there was a man who'd lost his son in quite a high-profile case, and I remember doing the interview with him, and he hugged me at the end of it, and that's always stayed with me. And that's one that can bring tears to my eyes, because it was the sort of humility and just lovely. And you carry those with you. I've been fortunate enough with the war zones that I've been to not have really come back with too much that's caused me problems later on. I think COVID was a really tough one for everyone. I think I felt quite a lot of responsibility. We had to get the news out, but we also were asking our teams to do the reverse of what the rest of the country was doing, and to go out there into the unknown. And it's not like anything else where we knew how to protect them. This was something different to deal with. So that one took its toll. One of the things is that anything can trigger you. And I worked with someone a few years ago, and we saw something not very nice in Baghdad, but it was a small thing. And he was absolutely haunted by it. And that's the thing that triggered him into a mental health crisis. And he was racked with guilt. He's like, but this wasn't anything bad. And I think of the other things that people have seen. And for me, it's like, it doesn't matter. It can be the small thing that triggers you. And I think that's what we have to be alert to. So yes, of course, the stories like Bosnia, the other frontline things I've done, the dangerous things, they stick with you. But you can be got by the little thing you least expect to get you. Everybody's different. Everybody has a different day when they're vulnerable. There's one day where you can watch all sorts of things, and there's another day you'll watch the tiniest thing and you're bawling and you're not really sure why. But I guess linked to this, I'm quite challenged at the moment about the concept of resilience. And it's something we talk about, and I think it's something that I've always proudly said I'm very resilient. It's sort of the sort of thing I put on my CV. And we talk about people having to build up their resilience. But I think there's been this sense amongst a lot of journalists that we're good at sort of absorbing all the difficult stuff and we can take it. And I'm not sure how healthy that is. And again, we talk about, help people build their resilience. Well, build it to what? To be able to absorb to the point where it's a problem. So yes, we do need to think about protecting ourselves and a bit of our own resilience. But as a sort of badge of honour, I'm a bit conflicted about it. And I think that's something that we do need to work on. I think it's sort of everything I've been saying about early on, being able to talk early on before something is a crisis, being able to say, do you know what, that's a bit hard. I'm going to go and have an hour off. It's saying to the junior people, do you know, why don't you not look at picture for today? And not just assuming that everyone will be fine with it. And as I say, I think it's not necessarily rewarding behaviour that's just like the people who don't say anything, the people who just do the difficult stuff every day and don't complain. I just think it's being a bit more aware about all of it. We have a lot of senior people who've had challenges with their mental health or struggled with their mental health who have chosen to talk about it openly, and I think that's important. It's not just the younger generation who are somehow the snowflakes with the mental health problems. I'm aware that it's a lot easier to speak up about it if you're an anchor or if you're somebody senior on screen, but I think it's making sure it's there for everybody, and a bit of responsibility from some of the senior people to say to somebody, do you need to take that break, or you don't have to look at that, or the rest of it. But I think there's so much full stop for different age groups to learn from each other. One of the things we do here from time to time is reciprocal mentoring. And yes, it's great for the junior person to get some tips on how to progress their career, but there's so much to learn as well if you're that senior person. So I think that's important, full stop, in loads of areas, not just mental health. And I think being freelance brings a whole different set of problems. I think, unfortunately, there are still things that are harder for women as journalists, and particularly around online safety and the sort of abuse that people get. So it's one of the things Women in Journalism does a lot of work in campaigning and lobbying, but also in workshops and training. I think I keep myself very aware of it. So I'm constantly checking in with myself. And we all have periods when we're feeling more mentally well and when we're feeling a bit more challenged. I like to exercise. I try to exercise most days, even if it's just 10 minutes in the morning. The only way to do that is to schedule it. I've taught by somebody, Jeff Archer from Tonic, who's brilliant. He's like, schedule everything. And even if it is 10 minutes here, just think about it and schedule it the night before. If I get too busy or there's lots going on and I don't do that, I can feel it beginning to affect. I've had a couple of weeks of not doing enough and it's there. I can feel the inner dialogue. So I'm like, come on, I've got to get this together next week. So that's a big one for me. I think it's scheduling time in your week where you can for a bit of downtime. On Friday mornings, I try to have no meetings and I just catch up on all my sort of policy stuff and the nice reading that I want to do. I really believe in having, particularly in the evenings, proper meals where you put your phone away, perhaps you've done a lot of the cooking and that sort of thing, and just have a separation. But I think it's mostly being aware and knowing what you need at different times. I know if I need to go and see someone for a few hours therapy. I know if I need to just go and sit in the garden and take a break. And it's being kind to yourself and giving yourself permission to listen to that, even if you're really busy, make time for it, because 10 minutes here can save you weeks of therapy down the line, really. There's a lot going on in the world at the moment, and throw into that the amount of information people are getting, the amount of misinformation and disinformation. I think there's never been a more important time for our brand of trusted, impartial, regulated journalism. I think people need to know where they can go easily to get information about their lives, about how to keep their families safe, about their businesses, and as they be able to find that easily and something they can trust. And that only comes through doing proper journalism. That's eyewitness journalism, that's interrogating, that's holding people to account, that's talking to both sides. And that needs to be properly funded and properly protected as well. And I think it is genuinely a service to the public, and we're very proud of our PSB status in that sense. But all forms of journalism, I think people are owed that information, and so that they can make up their minds about the world and the lives they live in. And I think it's a real shame, a lot of the threats we're seeing, partly to the funding of journalism, but also to the credibility of information overall. And it's certainly something we work on all sorts of levels to try and protect that. It's journalism is for consumers, for people at the end of the day, and that needs to be protected. It's always been quite tough. It's great fun and it's a really important job, but it gets harder and harder for people, particularly with the online abuse. And I'm so delighted when I meet young people who still want to come into this industry, who still want to do it, who want to get out there and do the eyewitness stuff. But we need to make sure the right people are still coming in and doing it and can have full careers that don't burn out after 10 years or receive such abuse that they can't carry on with it.